it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we're talking to Jeff Fenster, Executive Vice President of A&R at Warner Brothers Records, and discussing what it takes to be a top A&R, working with a Tribe Called Quest, Britney Spears, and Too Short, and how to determine what record is actually a hit record. Hey, it's Sammy. We're here for another podcast of the I Do Music podcast online. I am here with Executive Vice President of A&R at Warner Brothers Records, Jeff Fenster.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Up early for us?
I'm almost awake, so I'm ready to go.
Yes, good. So you've been around doing this A&R thing for a while now, and you've transitioned from different companies, companies over the years, but now you're at Warner Brothers.
Correct.
Tell me about that transition from New York to LA again, and this new position. It's not your first time working for Warner, actually.
No, I worked for Warner's way back in the 80s, but that was actually before I started doing A&R. I started in the music business as a music attorney, and I was in Warner's doing legal for almost 5 years early in my career, and then I moved into A&R. My first gig was at Geffen Records,
Right.
And then I moved back to New York, which is where I'm from, in 1990.
Where are you from in New York?
I'm from Uptown.
Okay, cool.
So 111th Street.
Nice.
Yeah, between Broad. I grew up having an interesting kind of musical setting, being a kid in Uptown New York. I went to the Apollo when I was a kid.
Were you born at the Apollo, or were you like a nice supporter?
Oh no! Yeah, no, I didn't. I was not a hater. I went to shows with my friends.
Gotcha.
We didn't really go to the talent shows at that time. I mean,
Gotcha.
I saw amazing James Brown.
Oh, wow.
And Temptations and Edwin Starr.
Nice.
and I'm dating myself here.
No, it's okay. But that's amazing.
It was amazing things that I saw, that I was just lucky because of where I grew up, that I had the access to that.
Right, definitely. So let's rewind a little bit. You said you started out as an attorney doing like more so the business affairs for these record labels, right?
Yes.
How did you ultimately land in A&R though?
Well, it was to some degree a happy accident, but the thing was, while I was a music attorney, I kind of wanted to do things that were more creative, just to keep myself, feeling motivated and
like DJing in
yes,
clubs
I was a
out
DJ.
there?
Yes, you did your research. Yes, I
DJ'd.
DJ'd. Yeah, I DJ'd. I DJ'd at some big dance clubs back in that day, one called Vertigo downtown, and I also DJ'd at alternative clubs.
Oh, nice.
Which was cool, that bands played at, and I would play in between the bands and stuff, and that was fun because I could play whatever I wanted.
Right.
And get pretty esoteric. But then, so in addition to that, I also had my own little label.
Yeah.
Called Vendetta Records. That was the little independent hip-hop label at
Really?
the time, yeah.
Nice.
And I had a group called 783. That was my main group, which was a couple of brothers from Brooklyn who had moved to L.A. And the DJ in that group was DJ Muggs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I worked with him early in his career.
That's so dope.
Yeah, it was fun. And then in addition to my little label, I also played with bands. And so basically what happened was, I was in the clubs in L.A., during the heyday, really, of the rock scene and the Sunset Strip and all that kind of stuff. And even though I was doing business affairs, I got to be friends with a lot of the A&R people and artists and so on from what I was doing on my, kind of in my spare time.
Mm-hmm.
And some people at Geffen Records, where I was actually doing their contracts,
Oh, okay.
because they went through Warner Brothers at that time. One of the guys there, Tom Zutat, went to David Geffen at some point and said, this guy's got good ears. Maybe we should give him a shot to do some A&R.
Right.
And that was, David Geffen gave me my first chance. So I moved into A&R. I didn't know very much about what I was doing.
Just doing it.
But I was just doing it.
So what after your time at Geffen, well, before we even go there, I wanted to ask you, in terms of handling the business of these record labels, how do you think that helped you become a better A&R and ultimately, this major executive?
Well, I think it's just helpful in general to understand how the business side of things work.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is a business, even though, I think most of us are in it because we love music.
Music, right.
But we work for companies, and so, the more that you know about how the different pieces work in the business side. Now, early on in my career doing A&R, there were people I knew from the business side of it who would always, why don't you handle that? And I was like, because I have to, that's not really my role anymore.
Right,
and
right.
I have to work with the artists, and I don't want to be the one who tells them they can't have this or that, because
Exactly.
I have to work with them on the creative side. So, but knowing it was extremely helpful, just in knowing how to make the pieces fit together.
Right, exactly. So after your time at Geffen, where did you take off to next? I know you've had multiple different positions, A&R positions,
Yes.
at different places.
So I was at Geffen probably only for about a year and a half, something like that, and then I was offered to be the East Coast head of A&R. For a label called Charisma Records, which was part of Virgin, and I don't know why anybody after a year and a half of doing A&R would offer me a position like that, but
Right, that's awesome though.
but I took it. I took the challenge, and that was when I moved back to New York in 1990, which was where that label was based.
Oh, okay.
Virgin was based in L.A. and Charisma was based in New York. So, and I worked there for about 2 years or so, and had a great time, did some really fun things. I worked with Maxi Priest and this group Enigma from Europe, who were big, and one of my favorite bands called Jellyfish, still to this day, that not that many people know, but they were big for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really good experience. And then I had a relationship with the people at Jive Records,
Right.
because when I was at Geffen, I had done the original demos with a Tribe Called Quest.
Oh, I saw that.
And so when Geffen Records kind of decided to get out of the urban business, because we only had a few things, and Tribe was deciding where to go, really between Jive and Elektra were the two companies trying to get them. I kind of advised the guys, and Tip and Chris Lighty, and rest in peace, Chris, and I developed a relationship with the people at Jive. So after I had been at Charisma for a little while, they came to me and approached me about being head of A&R at Jive, and I was a fan of the label, and obviously already had a relationship with the guys in Tribe, and so I took that job in 1992.
Nice.
And that was, I think, a very big part of my learning experience.
Definitely. You worked with a lot of people at that point going to Jive Records. Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys, those major, that was like my childhood. So I was just like, oh, he worked with Britney on One More Time. Like,
Yeah.
that was a big record, a big
Yeah.
discovery there.
Yeah, it was very interesting because when I went to Jive, it was really a hip hop and urban label.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great time my first years there. I did the Menace to Society soundtrack. It
Oh,
was
that's
one of the
lit.
first things I did when I got to the label, which was amazing. And I signed Keith Murray
Yeah.
with a guy named Jeff Sledge, who works at Atlantic now,
Okay.
who you should probably interview
Get
at
him
some
on
point.
here,
Yeah,
too.
he's in Atlanta a lot.
Nice.
And I signed, you know,
I saw that you
E40.
A&R, like the albums with Too Short and KRS-One.
Yes.
How was that experience? And because what we'll talk about too is that you have explored so many different genres, and you obviously really love music, like,
Yes.
because it's not just the urban side, it's not just pop, even though people recognize you for pop, right?
Yeah.
So how was it working with like Too Short, KRS-One, these people, and then going to like, work with Britney?
Well, it was, I mean, like I said, the urban side of it, and we had R. Kelly and Joe, and not even just hip hop.
Hip hop, right?
That was a fantastic experience. I was an early hip hop supporter, in the major label system when there weren't a ton of people
Backing it, right?
who really backed it, and even when I was in business affairs, I was supportive of things that were going on, and so it was a fantastic experience doing all of that. I love the music and the artists, and it was a blessing really to be able to work with people like
Mystical.
Chris KRS-One, Mystical, whom I signed, and
When did you, or where did you discover Mystical, or how did that come about, and him coming onto Jive Records in the beginning?
Well, that's an interesting story. So there was a one stop.
Mm-hmm. What is that exactly?
One stops were like independent distributors back in the day, who would, kind of be local or regionally based, who would handle distributing different labels.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know actually if it was a one stop or a record store actually technically, but there was a place called Odyssey down in New Orleans, and we used to speak to a guy there who would just tell us what was going on.
Right.
And one time, and both myself and Barry Weiss, who ran the label, would speak to this guy, Gary, I think his name was, who was down there. And one time he told us, he said, this is all bounce music down here in New Orleans at that time. But he's like, there's this one guy, and he's like a Southern preacher. And
Mystical.
He's amazing. And he's like, and he's moving. He's moving units in New Orleans, and he's not doing the music that usually sells in New Orleans. So check this guy out. So we heard him and his voice and all of that on his very early recordings. And he was signed to an indie label down there that was run by a guy named Charles Temple. And Barry and I went down together to New Orleans. And we remember we went into some like industrial park, like nondescript buildings. And they were like just dudes, a bunch of guys. You know what I mean? When we walked in, and we were like, we didn't know who anybody was. And
Right.
they walked us through these different rooms, and they had a little studio set up in one room, and they introduced us to a producer, and finally we got to this room in the back, and there was a guy kind of lounging on a couch, and we were like, okay, that must be the dude. So that was Charles Temple, and that was originally, as I said, the guy who had Mystical signed to him on this label, and that's how we signed him. Then we did the deal with him, but it was really off of a tip from somebody, and then just hearing the music, we knew he was special and he was different from anybody else.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. And I kind of want to get into the first, or how you discovered Britney too, because
Sure.
it was an interesting story I was reading, and also just the beginning, that first record that you
Sure.
worked to produce.
Well, I'll say a little bit about kind of how we got into pop music.
Yeah, pop. That's
at Jive, which really started with the Backstreet Boys before
Mm-hmm.
Britney, and um, there was a young guy who worked at another label who I wanted to hire to come over um, to Jive, and he was really more an urban guy at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And but he told me I can't come to Jive because there's a group that I found that I think is going to be really big, and I'm going to sign him to the label where I'm at now, so I have to stay. And I said, that's cool, you know, as an A&R person, we understand that if you have something you're passionate about. I said, but the door's open, you know what I mean? You just call me if anything. So the guy called me about a month later, and he said, man, I feel terrible. He's like, my label's decided not to sign this artist. And he said, so I don't know if you still want to hire me or not, but you should go to Columbus, Ohio this week because this group is performing at the Civic Center at an event for Students Against Dangerous Decisions, which was like MAD, like Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah.
And it's like none of these kids who are going to be at this event have ever heard this group. But I want you to go down and see what it is. Check it out. So I went down. It was the Backstreet Boys. They were amazing. They had like a full band.
Oh, wow.
And they already had the choreography and the harmonies and all of that. These young dudes, you know what I mean? Just like so together. And I remember after the showcase calling Clive Calder, who was the owner of Jive Records, and saying, man, I don't know if we'd ever do a pop group here at Jive. But I said, if we ever want to sign a pop group, a boy band, we'll never find one, you know, better than this.
Right.
So anyway, that's how we started. We signed Backstreet Boys. And then so one day I got a demo tape from a lawyer, Larry Rudolph, who of course became Britney's manager later on. And it just had one song on the demo. And it wasn't even in the right key because it was a song that had been written for Tony Braxton.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of urban song, and Tony Braxton's an alto.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, you know, but Britney had done a demo of that. And I got that in the mail, plus a composite card with pictures of her.
Of her. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I heard something in the voice, and I certainly saw something in these pictures. And I was like, wow, this girl could really be something. You know what I mean? Like, she can be relatable, girl next door, but she's also really attractive, and there's something commercial in her voice. So anyway, we flew her to New York. She did a little showcase for us. She came with her mom, and we found out all the history, how she had, you know, been on Mickey Mouse Club, and, you know, even before she got turned down the first time applying for the Mickey Mouse Club as being too young.
Oh.
And then she had gone and done an off-Broadway musical at this super young age, gone to New York with, you know, with kind of a nanny person, you know, like to watch her at that young age, and then reapplied to the Mickey Mouse Club and got accepted. And it's like, wow, this girl really wants this. And you could tell it wasn't coming from her family, it was coming from her. And she danced at the showcase and all of that. And we said, wow, she's really good. But she didn't have any music really.
Right. So you're developing.
So she was signed to a development deal initially. Gotcha. And we had her working with a producer and who was a Zamba producer. Zamba was our publishing company. And the owner of the label loved to do it that way, use our producers and writers and our studios and
right. Keep it in the family.
Keep it in the family. Keep it in the business family.
Right.
So she was working with this guy named Eric Foster White, who was very talented. But then we had already been working with Max Martin through the Backstreet Boys at that point. And so I spoke with my colleague in Europe. We had a A&R guy based actually in Holland, and we arranged for Max to come to New York, and I put him in my office with Brittany,
Mm-hmm.
and I left him there, and I told my assistant I'm going for a walk, and I'm like, I'm going to check in, and you let me know if they're still in there. And they spent about 3 hours just talking in my office. And then afterwards, Max went back to Sweden, and told me that he thought she was great,
Mm-hmm.
and that he thought he could do something. And then I don't believe he'd worked with her yet, actually, in the studio. And one day he said, "No, I have this song to send you,
Mm-hmm.
and that might be good for your girl." And that was "Hit Me Baby One More Time."
Oh, wow.
And the story of the song is great because it also involves Atlanta.
What about Atlanta?
So what about Atlanta is that the song was originally written, forgive me, I need a little water.
No, drink, please.
The song was originally written for TLC.
Yes. I did.
So, that's
That's interesting because
become
it's
kind of public.
so, yeah, that's super interesting.
You can
I can't-
maybe hear
How it could have been,
how
right?
it could have been T-Boz and all of that, but
I could a little bit.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, Max had written it. I think Clive Davis had asked him to do a song for TLC, and for various reasons I don't need to go into.
Yeah.
It didn't end up with TLC, and he had it on. Max basically had the song on his shelf, and he said, "Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. I thought this song could maybe work for your girl." And the song came in with a demo, which Max was singing on. We heard it and we went, "Holy, you know what? Like this is a record."
Yeah.
And so we recorded it, and then at that point we were like, "No more development deal. We're all in."
Yeah.
And Max and the crew of people there in Sweden did a lot of work on the record. Eric Foster White did some work on the record, and we knew that we had something, and we knew that we had hits, but it was really when we got the video in.
Right. That video is like classic.
Yeah, that's when
Yeah.
we knew. I remember Max and I were at Hotspot in New York, Moomba, on 7th Avenue South back in the day. Like, we had just finished the video, nothing was out yet, but we were having drinks and dinner there, and we just looked at each other and went, this is gonna go.
Right.
Like,
Right.
You know what I mean?
So with or after Jive, you actually, you did a lot there, but then
Yes.
you moved on to Island Def Jam, which
Yes.
is totally different in terms of the music you were doing. It was a lot of rock bands.
Yes.
How was that? Or did you enjoy that more? Like, what made you make that decision to leave what you were doing at Jive to go on over to Island Def Jam?
Well, for one thing, I'd known Leor Cohen.
Oh, and then that's who was over at Island Def Jam?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Leor was the person who brought me over. And I had known Leor from when he was promoting clubs in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a club called Radio out there. And when he first started bringing Run DMC and other rap acts out to perform in L.A. For the first time. And so I knew him from back then. And I actually saw him the week before he moved to New York to work with. I'm going to New York to work with Russell Simmons on the movie Crush Groove. I remember we all remember when Leor went to New York, and we were all like, "Yeah, he'll be back
Right.
in a month, whatever." And so I had known Leor, for a long time, and had always admired what he did, and so on. So when he approached me, it also just seemed like, to be honest, the right time for a change.
Yeah.
In my life, and they offered me a very good situation there, and And then I went there, and I kind of realized when I went there, all of a sudden, I was like, okay, well, Island Records, at least the Island side, which was going to be my primary responsibility, really mostly had bands, and really wasn't in the pop game.
Exactly.
And that wasn't really Lior's, natural
expertise.
Yeah, kind of lane. So, I mean, I had done rock bands at the beginning of my career at Geffen, and kind of as you said, I just love music. So that was a different challenge, but one that I loved. And, I was still very close to the urban side there, and Kevin Liles and, and Todd Moskowitz and all the stuff that we were doing. And we had an amazing run there in the 5 years that I was there. It was a great group of people, Julie Greenwald and Stu Bergen and all these wonderful people, and Rob Stevenson and Paul Pontius. And we were really like a family there. And, we went within less than 3 years, we were the #1 label. And most of the time that I was there, those last 3 years or so, we were, #1 or 2 or whatever among labels. So that was a great experience.
And there you actually worked to revive, or I guess help Bon Jovi with their big comeback album, Crush, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty classic. That's an amazing, thing to be a part of, I would say. And then later you actually returned to Jive.
I did. I actually, after Island Def Jam, I went to work for Clive Davis at J Records, which was all within the BMG system. And but pretty much from the minute I got there, Barry Weiss, who I'd worked with, in my those first great years at Jive, who was still running the label. Kind of, I remember he approached me at an event, like literally after I'd been at Jay for a couple of weeks, and was like, I shouldn't have let you go to Jay. I should have brought you back to Jive. That's where you belong. That's your home. And so we just kept talking. And then I think within about a year that I'd been working at Jay, and I had, again, a great experience at Jay learning from Clive, who's the master.
Right.
And got to do some fun stuff there. I did a Luther Vandross tribute album that was very dear to my heart because I knew Luther, and I got to work with amazing artists on that record, and it won a couple of Grammys, and It sold very well. And I got to work with Beyonce and Stevie Wonder and Elton John and Celine Dion and Aretha.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was incredible experience. That's my phone,
So good.
which I will turn off.
Busy man, we understand.
Let me turn the ringer off too here. But anyway, so that was just, it was all within the same system. So after talking to Barry for a while, it became obvious that, I'd be good for me to kind of go back home, so to speak.
Yeah. So you've acquired quite a few credits helping to develop these artists and their songs. But when you actually went back to Jive, you started working with the American Idol finalists.
Yes.
And some of the winners, right?
Yes, I did. We had taken over kind of doing the American Idol people that we had decided to move forward with for making records. That was a really fun experience because the show was still very... wasn't the first couple years, but it was still very, very big and influential, and got to work with some great artists there, including Jordan Sparks.
Yeah, I know. No Air, that was one of my favorites.
Oh, man.
Karaoke songs. I like that song. Yeah, I always try to sing just like Jordan. And then she had what was it, Chris Brown was on the record? Yeah.
Yeah, I will not do the Chris Brown part at karaoke. I have to be.
You have to refuse?
Yeah, I can. I'm not going to embarrass myself like that.
Okay.
All right.
So you also helped with Chris Allen's
Hmm.
"Live Like We're Dying," which was
Yes,
a really big record.
that was a
How
great
was that
record.
experience?
But all of those experiences were great.
Great, yeah.
The Jordan one, she's one of the nicest people I've ever met
Mm-hmm.
in my life, and her family. And the No Air story was great too, because we went to see the Underdogs, whom I'd known for years,
Mm-hmm.
Harvey Mason Jr. and Damon Thomas, with Jordan. And they were like, "We're going to play you this song, and you can't have it because it's already spoken for, but we're going to show you the kind of thing we could do for Jordan." And they played us No Air.
They said you couldn't have
They
it
said we
originally?
couldn't have it, and Jordan and I just looked at each other and we're like, "We got to have that song." So I started calling Harvey every day for I think like 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like, "Dude, I got to have that song." It's like, "I can't give it to you, man." And I was like, "Dude, I got to have that song like every day." And finally, after about a month, he kind of told me what the situation was. He goes, "Well, listen," he goes, "I can't give it to you because we have an artist who signed to us who wrote that song, and we're going to use that for him." And I was like, "I need to have that song." And about a week later, Harvey was like, "You know what? I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm gonna, but let me talk to the artist and make sure he's cool." Anyway, it was James Fauntleroy who wrote that song, who's amazing,
Yeah, absolutely.
amazing singer, writer, who I love, and got to know later. But he said, "We'll talk to James." And so finally, after about 6 weeks, they said, "You can have the song."
Look where
And
persistency gets you.
what's that?
Look where persistence gets you.
Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
Right.
And sometimes you just hear music and it's special. And that was one of those cases where I knew how great that song was. And when we recorded Jordan on it, it was great. And then I don't even remember who had the idea. It might have been Barry or me or somebody. Somebody had the idea of making it a duet, and we decided to send it to Chris Brown. And I knew Tina Davis, Chris's manager, from Def Jam days and so on. And I sent the song to Tina, and literally, I think within a half hour, she called me back and was like, "Chris and I listened to the song. The song is amazing.
Right.
We'll do it."
Nice.
So that's how that happened. And then he recorded on it, and they went and put some live drums from the bridge out on the song, and we just kind of really worked on it and getting a great vocal comp to have both of them kind of like, we put a lot of work into the song just to make sure it was right, because we knew what it was. The Chris Allen one was great because, again, another awesome guy to work with. And we just didn't really have the song, the one single we needed. And then I got sent this song that was written by a group who are very big in England and throughout Europe, named The Script.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, dope,
Yeah,
really
it's an
dope group.
amazing group.
So this song, they had thought was kind of too pop for them, but it had been out, but only as like the fourth song on a German like special little EP or something like that. So nobody really had heard the Script version of the song, and Andrew Frampton, who is a great songwriter, and the Script was signed to his label in the UK, sent me the song and said, "This might be good for something." And I heard that song, and again, it was like one listen, and I was like, "Man, this would be great for Chris." He heard it, kind of same thing, thought this sounds like a hit record.
Yeah.
And that was it. So sometimes it's just right place, right time.
Right.
People send you the right thing. And most of the artists that I've worked with are great songwriters. But I think, most artists that I work with are smart enough to know you should always listen to a song. And if somebody has a great song that you can make your own
Take
and
it.
all of that, take it.
Yeah, take it.
Take the hit.
So you talked about having like a special, I guess more so like intuition about a hit record, right? But what do you think? What do you think what are you looking for when you hear a hit? Like, is there a certain sound, or especially when you're trying to determine who it should go to, or like what artist the song should be written for?
Well, it's funny actually because I've had songs sent for one artist that I was like, why did people think it was right for that artist?
Right, right.
I had a big song with a band called Hot Shell Ray. Had a song called Tonight Tonight, which was a big hit record, pop hit record. It had originally been sent to me for Jordan.
Oh, really?
And I was like, this is not for Jordan. This is for a band. And I called the guys who wrote it, and I said, well, I have this brand new band, but I think we can break them with this song. And, because sometimes you also have to get the songwriters and the producers to let you have the song for a particular artist.
Right, right.
And there's a lot of competition nowadays, like if somebody's got a hot song,
Everybody wants it.
Everybody wants it. So anyway, I convinced them that it was better to use that song as the first single from a group that the label was really trying to push and break,
Right.
and to maybe holding on to it for some more established artists where it might not even be a single.
Yeah, I agree. And it after your history with Jive Records, you actually more recently started at Warner Brothers Records, right?
Yes.
And you're the executive vice president of A&R.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big title there. You got to put on a bigger hat. I feel like in a sense, but also I'm sure you have kind of scaled back in terms of what you're doing. Are you more so like overseeing? What in this position are you doing that's different from what you were doing in the past?
It's really not that different. I mean, I've been a head of A&R, kind of helping younger people learn for a long time now, and that's really a rewarding thing to do as well. But I love making records, and I still do that. I do a lot of that, and I'm glad I haven't moved into some kind of position where I don't get to do that anymore.
That's awesome. So what in terms of, what do you like about working with Warner now? Not to say that, obviously you've had great experiences everywhere, but what do you like about Warner?
One of the things I like about Warner is that it is a label that has a history of taking artists that don't necessarily fit in the most obvious lane, or that are really, because sometimes the more unique an individual an artist is, sometimes that makes it harder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To kind of figure out where to break them, or who the audience is, or they don't fit in an easy box. So, and I look at the history of Warner's, whether it's Prince or rest in peace.
Yeah.
Or Madonna, or Neil Young, or all these legendary artists that they've had over the years. There's just a thing in the building that, first of all, the artists are bigger than us, and that also there's a kind of a respect for and a patience with working with artists who are great and who can be big, but who might not be the most obvious,
right,
thing to categorize.
So what types of projects are you working on currently with Warner, or just in general? What are you working on?
So, some of the records I'm making at the moment include the amazing BB Rexa.
BB Rexa?
Who's a pop artist who is the 14th most streamed artist on Spotify.
Nice.
Which is pretty amazing when you think about it. And that's been through a combination of her records and also features, because she's an amazing songwriter. She wrote her first big one was Monster
Yeah.
for Eminem and Rihanna. That was
Nice.
her song. And
So she started off songwriting.
she started off songwriting. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was in a group for a short while when she was real young, like 19, with Pete Wentz from Fall Out Boy.
Nice.
Had a side project called Black Cards that I never really came out. And then she went to songwriting. And when I signed her, Eminem's camp already had this song and was going to do it. And then it was a question till nearly the end whether they were going to leave BB on it or not. And then they got Rihanna on it. And that was a wrap. But still, amazing look for her.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she's written and performed on Hey Mama for David Guetta with Nicki and Me, Myself, and I, the G-Eazy record, which was her record, and kind of that they, you know, the G, Roberson and G-Eazy and all those people kind of really, really wanted. And so we did that. It was great, I think, for both artists. And
Right.
they have a really great relationship. And he's on her record and so on. And then she was on the big Martin Garrix In the Name of Love record that she wrote. And she just is a force of nature. So we just released her first, her EP called All Your Fault Part 1 in February. And she just had a big record called I Got You. She's got a couple other records that are, you know, doing well, playlisting on the streaming services. One called, I don't know if I can curse on this.
Yeah,
on
totally.
this.
Go
Okay,
for
it's
it.
called Fuck Fake Friends, and which features G-Eazy, and then
Oh,
she's got another record called Bad Bitch, which features Ty Dolla $ign. It was produced by Stargate, and so now I'm working with her on part 2 and so on,
Nice.
And that's a good one. I also work with a couple of amazing singers. One is Andra Day,
Nice.
yes,
Yeah,
who I
she
signed.
was here for one music fest. That was the last time I saw her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's just an amazing artist.
Very talented.
Amazing live performer. I mean, just kills it. You know, especially in the early days, you know, when she was mostly performing in around LA where she lives, I would go to everything she did. And then not just because I worked with her, but because
Supporting her. Yeah.
and because I loved it every time.
Yeah.
You know, it never got old to me. And so she's obviously had an amazing first album and amazing run, especially with the song Rise Up,
Yeah.
which has been everywhere.
Everywhere.
And now we're working on album number 2 on her. I work with a label called Mind of a Genius, which has, among other artists, Gallant, who is, I think,
Yeah.
the best male voice
Yeah.
we got right now.
That's amazing.
And so we started working on his album Ology was nominated for Best Urban Contemporary Album at the Grammys, and predictably lost to the Queen Bee,
Right.
but which we all expected. And
But it was an honor
very
to,
happy.
you know.
It was an honor
yeah.
to be in that with the album that he really made himself with one young producer he met online, a very talented guy named Stint. And but we started working on album 2 with Gallant, which has been an amazing experience. I was just in the studio last Friday with him and Stint and a bunch of live musicians, and just
I'm here for
fun.
that.
Fun.
Here for the
Here
live
for the live
music.
music.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I like to use musicians when possible on records. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of stuff where it doesn't always fit or get thought of
Right,
anyway.
right.
But it's great, and when you really got amazing cats who can, you know, who can sound better than something programmed,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's special. So anyway, I do that. I work with an amazing artist from the UK named Dua Lipa,
Dua Lipa.
who's another female pop artist who is just killer, and she's blown up in the UK and Europe. Now she just had a #1 record called Be the One, and which we just started actually Impact Radio here next week.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that.
Exciting.
I had 2 great shows in the last 10 days. Week and a half ago, BB had a sold-out show at the Fonda on her first solo headlining tour, and then the following week, Dua Lipa had a sold-out show at the Belasco in downtown LA on her first U.S. headlining tour.
That's awesome.
It's great, man. When artists can actually go out and sell tickets.
Yeah, that's when you know it's
That's
real.
when you know.
Yeah.
So, and I work with an amazing young urban artist from Portland named Tyus.
Oh, you know what? Was it Rose of something?
Yes,
right? I
yes.
heard that project, and I was wondering what happened.
City of the Rose.
City of the Rose,
Which
yeah.
is about Portland, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so he's, we put out an EP with him a little while ago.
So does he mainly is, he raps and sings too? Does he?
He's mainly a singer.
Singer, yeah.
And he writes and produces his own stuff. Just turned 21.
Yeah.
And he's been working on new music. We're about to put out more music and kind of keep the flow going and just keep developing him. He's got a record with 21 Savage that we're dropping shortly, and
That's sure that'll put him.
That'll put him a little bit. I'll
bit
get people to notice. a bit more,
yeah. That's awesome.
So he's just working, and again, he can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
But we also got him working with some people. He was down here in Atlanta about a couple months ago.
Okay.
And he worked with Fuse and a few other people down here, and we're definitely going to get him. That was just an introductory thing, but we're definitely going to have him back to Atlanta because there's so many talented
definitely
producers and writers down here. And he really wants to do that as well. And, I've worked with Jason Derulo for a long time, obviously. If you haven't seen it, the video for the latest song, Swalla,
yeah.
the video's crazy.
I saw it.
You saw it?
Yeah, I did see it.
I think it's the best video he's done.
I usually, or I hadn't followed Jason Derulo since like the beginning, I guess.
Yeah.
So, because I'm not like a huge pop fan, I will be honest. But it's obvious that he's doing amazing things and that he's, still very, very much so relevant throughout his career here. So that's awesome. I'm happy for what you're doing. And I was gonna ask you too, speaking of like Spotify.
By the way, I've just mentioned
because
they were here last night. Another group that I work with through Mind of a Genius is a group called They, a rap group called They.
They had a show.
Who are amazing. Had a show here last night that was great, and they're definitely part of the future.
Yeah, definitely. The different sound.
I know,
Quite
really
a
different,
sound.
super talented, both of them, and one of them, Dante, is a tremendous writer, producer, works for other people. But both of those guys are super duper talented, and just at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I'm excited for them as well. I wanted to ask you in terms
Shout out to Drew, too. I'm not leaving you out, bro. Dante and Drew.
Dante and Drew. They. Yes. Yeah, y'all make sure y'all check out what was there.
Check out They. They've got music out that you can find easily. And I think my favorite song is still Motley Crue, but they got some really great stuff you can find on any of the streaming services, Spotify or SoundCloud.
SoundCloud, yeah. I heard them first on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
The which I wanted to ask you. So, like streaming, you have seen the changes in the industry, and people are not physically going to buy albums and records anymore. Have these changes for you made your job either easier or more difficult, specifically as an A&R?
Well, I think that's like the most kind of fascinating subject aside from the music. Mm-hmm. I do think sometimes in the industry now there's a tendency to talk only about that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what about the actual music?
Yeah.
And are you people actually listening to the music, or are you just looking at streaming numbers and stuff? I still listen to music. Mm-hmm. That being said, and I think kids listen to music, obviously, right? And stream and so on. But
there's just so many different ways to get it, which is why I think that's such a subject, because it's like, well, are people listening to the radio anymore? Are people buying on iTunes? Or, like, how do you get your music? I know for me, I listen a lot on Apple Music, SoundCloud. Those are or YouTube. Like, those are my top 3 places to find music.
Right.
But as an A&R, I always wonder, like, are you thinking about that? Like, at Warner Brothers, what are y'all thinking about in terms of the different streaming platforms?
Well, I think one thing that's very interesting is when you look at the streaming numbers, you see how, like, kind of dominant hip hop is in the streaming numbers. It really is like the number one genre in the streaming world. And then actually rock is surprisingly strong in the streaming world. Yeah. And then pop as well. But, whereas opposed to in the physical world where, for example, country, there's still a lot of people who buy physical country music. It's not nearly as big in the streaming world as it seems like it should be. But then again, I guess that's tied together. A lot of those people are still, more traditional, old school listeners. But in terms of looking for music, I mean, it is very expected that executives at labels now are doing more research-based looking for artists.
Yeah.
Because there is so much information.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You streaming allows you to see pretty quickly how people are reacting to something.
Exactly.
Or whether they don't know about it at all, which is also an issue nowadays when there are a lot of ways to kind of poke your head up. So there's a lot of that, and we do it too. We look for things that are, but in a sense, it's not that different from back in the day calling Gary at Odyssey and asking him what was popping.
Right.
So now it's, you can tell by looking at, whatever it is, streaming numbers, or, you still call radio stations and those people know what's coming and all of that. You're just always looking for what's coming. The one thing I would add is that, at least from my standpoint, I'm still more than willing, if I find something that I think is really special and that is a cut above, that I believe in, I will try to do that and try to get my company to allow me to do that, because I think, Adele didn't have, you know what I mean?
I know.
Would you have found Adele if you were just looking for, metrics and social media,
right.
streaming numbers and stuff like that? So I think there has to be room for both.
So you have a good balance between, like, actually going to showcases and actually listening digitally. You still make time for that, or you definitely go out and support those showcases. I think that's important. And here in Atlanta, we're very showcase driven. It's a lot of shows in general that these independent artists are putting on,
which is awesome, because I think there's a lot of places where that's not
doesn't
the
happen.
case.
Right.
Even LA, where you'd think where all these people are, it's not really a big showcase culture, certainly in terms of, like, the public. Like, I feel here in Atlanta, people want to see new music and they want to know what's next and all that kind of stuff. There's not as much of that in other places.
Interesting. So you signed and developed. We talked about different genres of music. Do you have a particular genre that you are more invested in or interested in working with?
No, I mean, I love it all. I mean, I think it's music. You know what I mean? And fortunately, look, here's the thing. You need a certain level of expertise in being in the game. So, like, I'll admit, and it's one of the things why, I haven't been to Atlanta for a minute, and I'm really happy to be here, and I'm going to be here more, because I think it's thriving, and there's artists, and there's producers and writers, and I know a lot of people that I've known here for a long time, but there's a lot of new people that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're going to be younger people who are going to be more in it than I am.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, like I think I've learned, I've been open enough over the years that's always been my thing. I'm just open, and I love when music changes and shit changes. You know what I mean? To like see where it's going and to keep current and
That's
stuff.
important.
So, in that respect, it can be anything. Like there's a guy I'm trying to sign right now. It's a young guy from England, and this dude's voice is just, like nothing I've heard, and that, turns me on, just the same as if I hear a hot record in a club, I'll still go to club, and if I hear a hot record in a club, I'm like, what's that?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, I have tried over the years not to put myself in a box musically. I mean, I think now I'll always do some pop music because, again, I didn't start out
Pop. Yeah.
trying to do pop music. I was like, Rick Rubin was my hero. And I met him very early on in my career and became friends with him. And that was because he did hip hop and rock.
Right. Right.
But I learned to love pop music and that I had an affinity for it. And I realized growing up, I always loved the hits.
Yeah.
So I probably always will do a lot of that. But to me, it's just exciting to be able to be blessed enough to be able to have a variety.
Absolutely.
In my life.
Absolutely. So do you you have had quite a successful career, and you're still obviously staying relevant in terms of keeping your ears open. But what do you think? What characteristics do you have aside from having an ear?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first start in being an A&R, right? What characteristics do you think you've had to make you such a successful A&R and music exec?
Well, I think the openness that I talked about before of just like, I don't get stuck. So even if I love a certain thing or a certain sound or all of that, when shit changes, sometimes I'll be working with an artist on a record, and you realize in the middle of the record, like, oh God, man, this may not work anymore. You know what I mean? Things have changed.
Yeah.
I mean, everything, sounds, I mean, tempos. I look at records now, like even on top 40 radio, there are these minimal records with really sparse production, definitely influenced by hip hop production, but not exclusively. But like these records that are kind of chill and all that kind of stuff. And then a few years ago, it was all these up-tempo,
yeah.
EDM-based records and stuff like that. That's the thing. People want, you get too much of one thing.
You want something else.
It moves.
Yeah.
And that, to me, the fact that I've always been, willing to be subservient to the game,
right.
to the music and where it goes,
right.
and is one thing. And then the other thing is honesty. I try to be honest with people. Try to do it. If I have to say something negative, I try to do it in a constructive way, and I try to not be cruel. But at the same time, I think, my job is not necessarily to be an artist's best friend every minute. I try to have a great relationship, but sometimes I have to be honest to do my job. It's ultimately the artist makes the decisions. It's their music, it's their career, but sometimes it's my job to say, I think you're going to shoot yourself in the foot if you do X, Y, or Z. You decide, but I want you to know the potential dangers or
right.
consequences and stuff like that. And sometimes in the short run, you know, you have issues.
Yeah.
But usually in the long run, you know, I feel good knowing, and I think people know that about me.
Yeah.
They know that they're going to get my real opinion. And I think that's also helped me not to have a lot of enemies
Yeah.
over the years, because again, I think, you know, bad news doesn't get better,
It doesn't.
right? Because
That's
you
true.
put a nice spin on it or you sit on it or whatever. And I think, you know, people appreciate, including people I've dealt with who come from over the years, who come more from the streets and stuff like that. You're much better off, like, just being upfront.
That's real. That's very real. And also you're a lot of, I'm sure, aspiring A&Rs and music executives are listening, so they want to know, if they were in your shoes, what advice, would you tell your 20-year-old self or your 25-year-old self?
I couldn't tell my 20-year-old self anything. That's the problem with being 20. What could I tell my 25-year-old self? You know, the game has changed a lot. You know, when I started doing it, there were certain fortunate things, including the fact that the music business was so healthy. And there were huge artists selling huge numbers that would carry. So someone like me starting out, I could screw up for 2-3 years and learn, because that's how you learn. I would say to everybody, I think this is true in anything, you learn by your mistakes.
Right.
You got to jump in. I mean, I remember Lior telling me, you know, he started as a tour manager.
Mm-hmm.
You learn a lot about people by what their first job is. You know what I mean? And Lior was he promoted clubs, but his first real job, like, was tour manager. And he told me, like, when I was a tour manager, and then when I went to Def Jam, he said, in each case, I had no idea what I was doing. He said, but I jumped in, and I acted like I knew what I was doing, and I was the loudest person in the room. But he said the most important thing was I made a ton of mistakes. But he said I learned from my mistakes. So I think, you know, it was a more forgiving time then, but I would still say to people, you gotta, you know, a lot of A&R people think the best way to keep their job is to just not do anything, okay? Because, you know, you don't commit to stuff, you don't, you know what I mean? Like, and I understand, but I think the way you get good, the people I see who are young, who are good, is they believe in themselves. You got to be smart. You got to think things through. You got to know, if you're into an audience, you got to know what really is the potential for that artist.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Are they an artist for a certain group of people that are going to like them? And if so, can you do that in a way that still makes sense business-wise and marketing-wise and all of that? Or is this an artist that's going to have a, you know, bigger audience? You have to kind of really be thoughtful and honest with yourself. But at the same time, if you believe, you have to be willing to try shit and to make mistakes, because that's really, I think, how everybody learns.
I agree. I definitely agree.
So
one thing that you said that sparked another question for me is I think aside from, or in the process of developing an artist, of course, their branding and their imaging is a huge thing. You always hear this word branding.
Right.
So what could you tell an artist, you know, that's looking to even refresh or just, you know, about their image, like, and the music and how that correlates?
Well, I wouldn't propose to be the greatest expert in that, in branding and imaging. I mean, you know, I've seen enough to, I think, have a decent opinion, but it's not.
I mean, it kind of even made me think about what we were talking about earlier with Britney and how you felt like she was like the girl next door, but she also had this kind of sex appeal about her, and y'all definitely marketed that for her. So
And by the way, she did for herself.
She did for herself. Excuse me.
She was a marketing genius. That was one of the
awesome.
beautiful things about it. The "Hit Me Baby One More Time" video with the Catholic schoolgirl outfits and all of that was her idea.
Oh, nice.
She came up with the treatment for that
Great.
video. But yeah, I think Look, I think lifestyle now is obviously a very important of part of who people are. Take any number of examples. Yachty, take Yachty as an
Yeah.
example, and even like the stuff he does with doing with Nautica
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. I mean, he came up with a a particular image that fits, I think, his music,
Mm-hmm.
that fits who he is. And I think because brands, not just in music, I mean, brands and branding are
Everywhere.
everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
kind of what it's about right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of young artists and the smart ones think about that because, first of all, it helps an identity for them musically. It helps make them stand out musically. And then in addition, it can give them these other, you know what I mean? These other business opportunities and all of that. And then, once you're a big enough brand, you can almost transcend the music. I mean, look at Jay-Z or Beyonce or
Right.
Kanye or these people. They transcend the music. I mean, in some ways, sometimes I'm still a music guy.
Yeah.
I like the artist to focus on the music, but I
Yeah.
understand it's a bigger picture.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, is there anything else that you could leave us with in terms of what you want to push for your newer artists, what you have coming up next, like literally next
Yeah, I think I talked about all my
upcoming projects?
current things that I'm excited about. I'm working also on album 2 right now for Adam Lambert, who is another American Idol alumnus who I didn't work with when he was
Okay.
on Idol, but we have him now in a partnership with Max Martin and his MXM crew. And I love the fact that I still get to work with Max and the fact that he is the biggest thing in the pop game, probably bigger now than he was even
Good.
in that day,
Yeah.
between Taylor Swift and The Weeknd and Katy Perry and all the other stuff. And so anyway, I'm excited because Adam is, again, a unique voice, amazing singer, the nicest guy. And so we're just in the process of that, getting songs together. His first album was very successful. His solo album we did with him last year, super successful, especially like on a global basis.
Good.
And so I'm doing that. And then there are some new things I'm looking at, which I can't talk about here.
Yeah, we'll follow up later. It's okay.
You can follow up with me anytime. But I'm just excited that, Warner's is a label as well, has amazing things going on. Our partnership with OVO has been amazing for us, and I think has been a good partnership on their part because we really kind of respect their expertise and both musically and obviously from a marketing standpoint as well. But it's been a great partnership, and whether it's Party or any of the other artists they have, that's a fantastic brand for us to be associated with and working with very closely. And Mac Miller and
I liked his last project.
his
a lot.
last project was great, and I think it caught up people to some extent by surprise
It
in
did,
terms
it
of
did.
like what a serious like project it was,
Right.
and how good it was. That was very intentional. He's a very smart guy. He knows what he wants to accomplish
Yeah.
musically.
Nice.
So there's a lot of great stuff going on, urban and otherwise.
Awesome. So a lot of artists or a lot of people in general just feel that labels may or may not be the best decision for an artist at this point, being independent, being a big thing with Chance and all the other artists. Could you offer your opinion on why this is or isn't necessarily true, and what does the label actually offer the artist?
Sure. I mean, that's something we think about. by the way, I chased Chance around for a while, and in the hopes back then when we were kind of hoping that maybe he would, he would bless one of us. And I know there was a point at which he was like, "Who is this old white dude that keeps being in my dressing room every night?" And I think he finally figured out who I was. But I would talk to Pat, and and always say hello to Chance. But I think the first few times I was like, he's like, he has no idea who this dude is. He's hanging out here. But I enjoyed the shows so much. He's an amazing artist, and I think the one thing I would say is, not everybody can be Chance, and or would necessarily want to do it the way that he's done it, which is amazing. And I think there's certainly artists can do a lot of things on their own right now, and I think artists have choices. That being said, there are still, first of all, there are things that labels can do that nobody else can do. Mm-hmm. One of them, and the most obvious ones, is national radio. I think the top 40 panel alone, media base, is 187 stations. Okay,
yeah,
that's one format. So, to actually break a record nationally at radio, whether it's top 40 or rhythmic or whatever, yes, there are independent people you can hire, but really nobody can do it like a label. Nobody has the staff, the national staff, and the kind of the continual access and kind of juice with. So that's one that kind of everybody knows. But I think one thing that's super important, because I'm actually in discussions right now, for example, with one artist who's been able to do, quite a bit on their own, successfully in terms of building a following. And there's another one we signed, not me personally, but we recently signed a rapper named Phora. Phora, who's amazing and who built up an incredible following, especially live following. He's West Coast based, so he's known there. Certainly probably not that big in Atlanta, certainly in comparison. But he's got an amazing live following and people who are in, you know what I mean, all the way in, really like dedicated fans who take what he says seriously and all of that. And he signed with us recently. And I think it was because, again, major labels can be, and I know we are very good at this, we can be good partners to people who want to, we're Macklemore's partners. And even as Macklemore was, out kind of correctly saying, I'm completely independent, and he and Ryan, that was very important to them. We were working radio and doing other things for them. We're very good at kind of taking the back and supporting artists and giving them, giving them resources and, but not getting in their way. Because I think a lot of times, the idea of being independent to artists is at least as much creative, wanting to have creative control, as it is to like make all the money.
Right.
And because again, arguably, internationally, for example, is another way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That it's hard for artists if you want to be big on a global basis, it's hard to do independently. You maybe have to do like a patchwork of labels all over in different territories and stuff. Whereas being in a major system, I see it because I have pop artists that succeed on a global basis. Mm-hmm. I've had for a long time, right? Since Backstreet, who were enormous in Europe, couldn't walk down the street in Germany, and yet they could be in Orlando in their hometown and nobody was checking for them, So, again, if you want to be big on a global basis, you kind of really need a major label system. And I think on the creative freedom side of it, I think smart labels now are kind of like, and this has kind of always been the way at Warner's, kind of understanding. We're not the artist, right? We're not the stars. and we will let the artist look independent and be independent in the sense that they're still calling the shots, and kind of determining how the brand is going to be presented and how the music is going to be presented and rolled out and so on. And I think if you do that, then, I think we're still providing the artist the best of both worlds. That being said, I respect artists that decide that they want to take the independent route, and when they can make it work the way that Chance has, more power.
More power to you.
More power to you.
Awesome.
Just don't have everybody do that, because I still got kids in school. Damn it! I love this. I want to keep doing this.
When working with Too Short, we were talking about Too Short and KRS-One, E40. Yeah. You were actually able to offer them a special deal, similar to what we're just talking about. Offering the not so exclusive or non-exclusive, I guess, contracts, if that's the right terminology. How are you, or why were you so willing to do that then? And it's interesting how that's come back around.
Yeah, I don't. There weren't so much like not exclusive deals as they were like maybe just not traditional artist royalty deals and so on. I think back then, and this was probably more Clive Calder, who owned Jive, and Barry Weiss, than me really in terms of the deal side of it. But we were an independent label ourselves, and I think we were for a long time the number one independent label in the world, and so we understood the kind of entrepreneurial kind of approach to things, and Too Short selling records out of the trunk of his car, and 40 always having a very independent business-minded thing where he could put out records on his own in the Bay Area. And I think we just kind of, we also, to being an independent label, we didn't necessarily want to put up the kind of upfront money maybe that a major would. So to us, it just made sense to kind of partner with smart people and do things that way. And I think, we didn't do it in every case, but, we did it where we knew people were really, as in the case of Short or 40, were really bringing something to the table. They already had,
right,
the ability to generate business. And I think, that's similar now with a lot of the younger artists, where the business has kind of opened up a bit.
Dope. So, yeah. So
good?
I think we've got it all out there. It's so much to talk about. There's so many things that we want to understand in terms of being an A&R and being a music exec like yourself. But I do thank you for spending this time with us to chat about it, and I wish you much luck with all of the artists that you have. I don't understand. You're such a busy man, it seems like.
It's all good. I love it. It's just, it's the artists are the ones, I'm just there to help. Mm-hmm. I'm very happy to be down here in Atlanta, and I have a lot of old friends down here, Jermaine and Brian Michael Cox, and
yeah, I saw an old photo of you and JD.
Yeah. I go back. I signed JD's first group ever, Silk Times Leather, when he was like 16. And yeah, so we go back. I love JD and like a lot of people, Brian Michael Cox and Sean Garrett and certainly Organized Noise, all those people. But I'm also very excited. There's so many like new and young people here who are doing such great things. This is just a great place. So
yes.
Happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much. And where can they follow you on social media if you're
I'm like
on
totally
social?
like, you can follow my Instagram. Let's look up Jeff Fenster. I don't even remember exactly what my shit is, but people seem to be able to find me on Instagram. I must admit I'm pretty again, because I really focus on what I do as opposed to promoting myself on social media. I need a brand manager.
No
Maybe
worries.
that's if you
Holla
got
at
some
me.
spare time.
Holla
Yeah, I
at
was
me.
going to
You
say.
know, we could talk about it for sure. Definitely. Sammy approved. And if you
What do you got there?
Jay Fensty.
Jay
It's
Fensty.
Jay Fenste. Yeah, Jay Fenste. JFENSTE.
Okay, we found the
you'll find me
Instagram.
on Instagram.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony.
But
I'm on there. I haven't put anything on there up in a minute, but
no worries.
my
we got
Snapchat game is great. No, yeah, my Musically, I got a lot of followers on my Musically. No, I'm going to try to get that together. But really, if people want to get a hold of me about music and stuff like that, I'm at Warner Records in LA. I'm not hard to find. Anyway, thank you.
No, thank you so much. And thank y'all for listening to another episode of the I Do Music podcast. We'll be back next time. Yeah, we out.
We out.